This episode is brought to you by SteelRoot, a national leader in helping companies meet cybersecurity compliance requirements and prepare for CMMC. Their experienced team of engineers and consultants assist organizations of all sizes to implement and manage IT systems that meet the technical requirements in DFARS and CMMC. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of 123 CMMC. My name is Dana, and I will be your host. And our guest today is Ryan Hydorn. Hello, Ryan. How are you?
Hi, Dana. Doing well, thank you. Thanks for having me back.
Good to see you again. Good to see you again. I think we have a good topic that is going to be very helpful for a lot of people. We're going to talk about Office 365 and CMMC compliance. All right.
Exciting stuff.
Yeah, exciting stuff. All right, our first question is, what are the different versions of Office 365? Because like I just mentioned to you, I think a lot of people don't even know that there are different ones.
Yeah, definitely. Good place to start. So I'd guess that probably most of your listeners have some idea of what Office 365 is, just because so many companies are already using it for email and Teams and file sharing and that sort of thing. But unless you're working under compliance requirements, you'd have no reason to know that there are actually several different versions of Office 365. So the main version that most of us are familiar with is called Office 365 Commercial, and that's the main flavor of Office 365 that Microsoft sells. But they also have different clouds that meet compliance requirements for defense contractors or state and local governments or the federal government itself. So in addition to Office 365 Commercial, we've also got a flavor of Office 365 called GCC Moderate, which used to just be called GCC, and we also have GCC High. So the GCC stands for Government Community Cloud, and then there's also Office 365 clouds for the DoD and for other branches of military. But why are there all these versions? It's a pretty simple answer. It's basically each one of them supports different levels of compliance requirements and specific requirements for security and data sovereignty, which really just means that data is subject to the laws of the nation in which it resides. So, for example, Microsoft also has an Azure Germany and an Azure China, but if you're a company in the US defense industrial base, you've got these requirements to protect controlled unclassified information, or CUI, under DFARS. You may also have export control requirements that say your data can only be accessed by US persons, and that is where Microsoft's GCC High cloud comes into play.
So what's the difference between High and just regular GCC?
Great question. Super confusing. The short answer is that GCC Moderate, or regular GCC, shares the same Azure platform as Azure Commercial, whereas GCC High uses Azure Government, which is a completely different infrastructure staffed by only US persons. There are other differences as well. There's actually a great blog on the Microsoft public sector blog that we can link to, maybe in the video description, that goes into great, enormous detail on the various compliance requirements that one cloud can meet over the other.
Okay, well, this ties right into our next question. So what about for CMMC? Do we have to use GCC High?
Yeah, so that's actually a complicated question. We can dig into it a little bit here, and I'll give you my opinion. I would refer your listeners to check out that Microsoft blog that goes into much greater detail. But I would say, first of all, if you're never going to hold controlled unclassified information or CUI, and you only ever need to reach CMMC level 1, then lucky you can choose whichever cloud best suits your company's needs. But my recommendation is that for any organization that may hold CUI now or in the future, you should choose GCC High in all cases. And a couple reasons for that would be, like I was mentioning, Commercial and GCC Moderate can't support export controlled information under ITAR or EAR that a lot of defense contractors interact with. Also, there are other types of CUI called CUI specified that might have some of these US data sovereignty requirements as well that Commercial and GCC Moderate can't accommodate. And you can find more information about that on the CUI registry on the National Archives website. But speaking from a systems administrator perspective, moving from one cloud to another requires a full migration. So if you anticipate that you may hold CUI in the future, even if you don't now, I think you should choose GCC High and save yourself a future headache. But one caveat on that is you will definitely find people out there who will say you can use commercial or GCC moderate for CMMC level 3. And I'm not saying that it's impossible. I'm just saying that I would choose the cloud where Microsoft is making a commitment to customers in the defense industrial base to meet not only requirements today, but into the future as well. And that's GCC High.
It sounds like a very good idea, especially if you have to move all that stuff over. You might as well just do it and then do it once, right?
Huge pain in the butt. Yeah, totally.
All right. So our next one is Office 365 ready right out of the box.
Yeah. When it comes to CMMC, the answer is no. So you can't just buy some licensing and then you're ready for your CMMC assessment. Yep. Would be nice if that was the case. Once you land in the right cloud for your compliance needs, now you've got this platform, right? And it's got all these great tools for business productivity and security, IT management, cloud infrastructure, so on. But all of those services need to be configured or set up to manage and support your security requirements in your individual use cases. I know you and I have talked about this before on other videos, right? There's no silver bullet for CMMC. There's no turnkey solution, and Office 365 is no different. It's flexible, but you still have to configure it. So a couple ways to go about that. At SteelRoot, we designed what we call our reference architecture for CMMC, which includes configuration baselines for Office 365, all those different settings to support various security requirements. And we deploy and manage that. But you don't have to pay a vendor either. There are tons of great community resources out there. And we actually just put out a document called the GCC High Buyer's Guide that will walk you through some of this decision making around getting the right licensing and all that for the services that you need. But one important thing to drill into for all of your listeners is that when you're using a cloud service provider like Microsoft or another one, there is a shared responsibility model for compliance. And basically what that means is you're using this cloud service provider, or CSP as we call them, you can actually inherit a lot of their security and compliance practices. So things like physical security, maintenance, and other things that Microsoft is doing to their infrastructure also applies to you because that's where your data is hosted, right? So that's part of what makes the cloud such an appealing option for compliance. And thankfully, Microsoft tells you exactly where their responsibilities end and yours begin. So if you're a Microsoft customer, you can find that in the Compliance Center in Office 365.
SteelRoot, a national leader in helping companies in the defense industrial base with CMMC preparation and federal cybersecurity regulations. Big or small, SteelRoot is here to help design, build, and manage IT. The SteelRoot reference architecture is a secure, cloud-native operating environment built on zero trust principles. SteelRoot also provides managed cybersecurity, IT, and virtual ISSO services. Visit steelroot.us for more information. I was just going to say, that whole shared responsibility, I think that's also a little bit of a CYA on, the part of Microsoft, but that's good that that'll spell out for you, where the line in the sand is, where they stop and you have to assume responsibility. So that is good. That is good. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say absolutely. And I think that it can be a big time and energy savings too. So as long as you understand the cloud service provider's responsibility matrix and you know what you're supposed to do, the ability to inherit some of those practices from a third-party service provider can, in some cases, scope out a lot of the responsibilities that you might have otherwise had.
And the first step is knowing that there are shared responsibilities as opposed to just assuming that they're going to take care of everything.
Absolutely.
Okay, so if you use a different cloud service provider, how do you know if it's compliant?
Yeah, so obviously Microsoft is not the only game in town, right? And even though I think it's a good one for companies preparing for CMMC, there are other great options out there too. So basically, regardless of who your CSP is, you need to find out the answers to a few questions if you're a defense contractor. So first of all, are their services FedRAMP authorized? If you're going to have CUI on these platforms, they must meet the FedRAMP moderate baseline. Technically, if you're a defense contractor, they must be equivalent security requirements to FedRAMP moderate. But the most defensible position is to use cloud services that are actually authorized by FedRAMP, and you can find that information on the FedRAMP Marketplace, their website. And then, like we were just talking about, ask that CSP for a copy of their customer responsibility matrix. Any FedRAMP cloud service should have that CRM document that outlines which controls are met by the provider, which are a shared responsibility, and which are solely on you.
Yeah, that is good. That's good. But the other thing is, I always say, if it's not broken, why, just stick with Microsoft. And I have no association with Microsoft, but if it's there's so much to worry about in the CMMC thing that if Microsoft has its act together, but I mean, I guess if you're not with Microsoft right now, you might not want to shift. But those are good questions that you just said that you should definitely ask the provider if you're going to stick with somebody besides Microsoft.
Absolutely.
All right. So this is another one. How do you know if you're buying the right licenses?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I always joke that you could totally get a PhD in Microsoft licensing. There are just so many services and features in Office 365 and Azure, and so many different ways that you can split up the licensing. So for our call today, I actually brought a little show and tell.
Oh,
tell me if you can see this, okay?
Oh, this is impressive.
All right, so what this is, we reference this chart so often that we printed it out and got it framed. It comes from a website called m365maps.com, which is an awesome resource for understanding Office 365 licensing. And without rabbit holing on all of that, really the first step to picking licensing is to figure out what services that you're going to use. And it's as simple as, if you're trying to build out a whole environment for CMMC in the cloud, which I think is a great idea in a lot of cases, you're going to need more than basic like email and file sharing, right? So you're going to want things like Azure Active Directory, Defender for Office 365, but then there's a whole bunch of great security tooling that's also in the 365 cloud that you may also need. So, respectful of our time today, in the steel root reference architecture, which is basically our technical blueprint for CMMC level 3, we're big fans of Intune to manage and configure devices. We use information protection to encrypt and protect files. We use Privilege Identity Manager to enforce least privilege access, and so on. So these are all things that you want to have general awareness of before picking your licensing. You can always change it later too, but I did mention that we're putting out this resource called the GCC High Buyer's Guide, and just got the print version of it actually today. It's actually on our website too.
Nice.
And I'm super happy with how it came out. It's full of tips, recommendations, technical information. It's not a salesy sales pitch at all. And we've got a bunch of examples of like different licensing packages for different use cases that might be helpful. So I can definitely share the link for that as well.
Yeah, that is great. And that's the thing, is that this stuff like the back of your hand, but most regular people don't know what it is. So any kind of a cheat sheet or something like that you can condense the information so it's not so overwhelming is great. So that'll be awesome to have that link. Okay.
Totally.
All right, moving right along. So how can you get access to GCC High and Azure Government?
Yes, so it's a lot easier now than it used to be. But the first thing you need to do is apply to become eligible and to demonstrate that you have a need to be in this government community cloud. You used to have to show them contract language. Now, any company that has a valid CAGE code or SAM registration, which is every government contractor really, can buy GCC High licenses. So you can apply online. It's a simple process. We've got that link in the buyer's guide. We can also share it in the video description. Okay. Basically, once you get Microsoft to deem you eligible, once you have that in hand, you got to find a reseller. And right now, there's only about 30 companies that can sell you the licensing. My company's not one of those companies, but we have worked with many of them. And I have to say they're all a little different. So some of them will just sell you the licensing. And that's a great option if you know what you want. Others are going to insist that you buy services from them as well. Some of them really understand DoD compliance. Others are primarily Microsoft integrators that probably don't have too much of a clue on compliance. So really, depending on what you're looking for, one reseller might suit your needs better than another. but they all offer more or less the same pricing on the licensing, which is great. And you can find a full list of those resellers online.
Okay. And roughly how long does it take to get approved? Because this is stuff that people need to, you know, they're going to start getting their CMMC act together. They need to know how long everything is going to take.
I gotta hand it to Microsoft. They used to take a very long time to approve these things, and the last few eligibility processes that I've been involved in have taken a week at the most. So they turn it around pretty quickly, and I'd say the resellers also have accelerated their time from getting an order to getting the licensing cut. So thankfully, it's not too long.
Good. So that's not where the cog in the wheel is going to be. So that's good.
Yes.
Just figured I would ask about that. All right.
That's a good one.
So that's all we have. Where's my mouse? There it is. Okay. So that's all we have for today. Was there anything else you want to add along with that? I mean, that was all really, really good stuff to help people, you know, learn about Office 365.
Yeah, I think maybe just in closing, I would emphasize that it's definitely not as easy as buying a licensing and then you're compliant. I don't think anyone at this point assumes that. But my biggest tip would be before you buy anything, you really need to start by defining your system boundary. Where are the boundaries for the system that's going to contain CUI? If you're just using Office 365 for email and you've got all your other security requirements covered with other solutions and tools, that's going to look a lot different than if you are looking at Microsoft as a strategy for compliance and trying to lean on all of those services in that shared responsibility model for compliance. So there's a bunch of different questions you can ask about your use case to try to narrow in on what's going to be the best fit. But ultimately, it starts with understanding what are you going to use this solution for.
And you know what I think this is a really good point about too, is that these are good questions for you to ask, you know, your managed service provider, because you might not understand enough, but if you at least ask the question and they know, and they can then they can help, you know, then you're going to have confidence in them. You say to them, you know, do we need to use this GCC High for, you know, CMMC? And they're like, oh, I don't know, you know, it's going to kind of raise a couple of flags. So that's good at least too. People that don't know this technical stuff can at least have questions that they can then ask their IT people. So that's good.
Right. Yeah, and it's not like black magic or anything like that. The services in GCC High are the same ones that are in commercial. They're just on a different infrastructure that meets those requirements. So if you're already familiar with Office 365 to some degree, that translates over for the most part.
All right, good stuff, good stuff. So I am going to introduce my other little buddy that I have here that I've been trying to entertain. So here's Hank. Say hi, Hank.
Hey, Hank.
He's been biting my hand this entire time as I was trying to keep him quiet. So
he was so good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Hank.
Yes, you're good. Say okay. Bye, everybody. All right. Well, thank you very much, Ryan. I appreciate your time and, of course, all your expertise, and look forward to having you on again. And thank you, everybody, for listening and watching. And we hope to see you on the next episode. Right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
This episode is brought to you by SteelRoot, a national leader in helping companies meet cybersecurity compliance requirements and prepare for CMMC. Their experienced team of engineers and consultants assist organizations of all sizes to implement and manage IT systems that meet the technical requirements in DFARS and CMMC.